Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. It's Maddie here. Today we're going to be talking about the best decks for ranked battles going into the second week of this ranked season. It's a short ranked season. In fact, I guess we'll make another video next Friday because I don't think the season will be over by then. But it ends really in only 2 weeks. It's a short season. But the current climate of Pokemon Pocket right now from a competitive sense is very interesting. Very, very interesting. The season's been going on for a long time ever since Mega Rising came out. So things are very condensed, but definitely some very significant trends, and I think it really is, skewing which decks I think are competitively viable right now. So it's good to be on top of things, and because it's a short rank season, it's more of a sprint than a marathon, and I would heavily recommend that you guys play the decks that we talk about in today's video if you want to rank up as effectively as possible. However, before we do that, you guys got to go ahead and register for the Pocket Mads Pocket Tournament. It's cut off here, but it's PMPT number 11. It is tomorrow at noon, so I would definitely recommend. We have $250 in the prize pool. Link to register down in the description below. Today's video is going to be pretty quick because most of the decks in this video we've already talked about previously throughout the month. So we're going to give a quick little update, and I'm going to talk about why these are the decks that I would play right now and probably really for the next week or so. The first one is going to be typical Suicune and Greninja. This is double water Shuriken Greninja. I really do think that this is still the strongest deck in the game. However, since it dominated a ton last week, I do think that the metagame is kind of shifting towards being strong and counterplaying this deck. So this is still the driver right now, but there's tons of different options in the metagame. And I think that you can play a bunch of different decks that are all kind of strong into the typical Suicune and Greninja deck, so there's definitely an upside to that. This is the first deck I wanted to take a look at here. Just an example, we are playing double Irida, double Cyrus with Indeedee. No middle evolution here, no Frogadier. I don't think it's really that necessary. I think most people figured out that Frogadier just isn't that useful of a card in the face of Chingling, so we're just not really playing it, but we are playing, of course, One Giant Cape. Yeah, the metagame right now is just full of decks. If you're playing ranked right now, it's just full of decks that are strong into this particular matchup. Tons of, Magnezone, Oricorio, Decidueye, in other decks that we're going to take a look at in today's video. So what I would say right now is if you're not playing Suicune and Greninja, you need to play something that, you feel confident is able to beat this deck in the head-to-head matchup. But nothing's really changed here. I do have an alternate sort of version of Suicune and Greninja, which I do think is probably, an interesting choice. Like if you wanted an alternative, right? And that's going to be double Greninja EX, but I'm not super, I guess, confident in this list right now either. I think a lot of the benefits right now in the current metagame for Suicune and Greninja is the fact that Suicune with Indeedee can kind of tank Chingling, and then, we can get the Water Shurikens up and double Cyrus. Like, that's still the primary win condition here. Here's an example of a deck that went like 10-1 at a recent tournament, playing double Greninja EX with Misty, and I think that's really, really funny. Still playing double Cyrus. So, again, I wouldn't necessarily recommend the double Greninja EX version of Suicune right now. I would definitely recommend double Water Shuriken, but keep in mind, everybody is sort of counterplaying this particular strategy, so you got to be on top of things. And while I do think Suicune Greninja is still one of the stronger decks in the entire game, the meta right now is just going to be filled with decks that you're not going to love to go up against, especially in ranked. Like if you're anywhere in the top 5,000 of ranked, you're either seeing this deck list or this Suicune Greninja, or you're seeing a bunch of decks that are strong into it. So you kind of have to pick and choose, right? I think that there's so many options. Like the metagame is condensed, but like throughout the season, we probably saw 10 to 15, strong meta strategies, and any of them can kind of pop up at any given time, depending on how well positioned they are towards the top of the metagame and which decks are seeing the most play. Suicune Greninja seeing the most play, but I got to imagine that, in this weekend's Pocket Mads tournament, we're probably going to see it have a much less dominant, I guess, win rate than we did in the previous week, right? Just because there are available options to beat this deck, it's just, things go up and down. It's sort of like a heartbeat of the metagame, right? And right now, we're kind of in the segment of counterplaying Suicune Greninja, so... Anyway, these are the kind of the two versions I would play. They're both very similar. This one with Misty is interesting. You're playing it a bit more high roll. That way you can kind of get that turn 2 Greninja EX 100 damage out no matter what. Or not no matter what, but more consistently, right? Because even if we lead Suicune, we can free retreat with Shifting Stream. And then if we go first, maybe we get a free energy with Misty. So I like the idea here. Going first is definitely one of the worst things for this deck list. So I think Misty does make a little bit of sense. But anyway, those are the Suicune decks. Let me know what you guys think. I wouldn't necessarily recommend you play them in ranked right now, but they are are still, of course, top options. Next up is going to be Hydreigon. Here is an updated Hydreigon list. I believe this is going to be like Saigon's deck, which is, I think, what a lot of people are playing right now in the face of Suicune and Greninja. We talked about this earlier this week. I do think that you could kind of take out Leap over Absol in place of like a Chingling, because I do think that Chingling is very useful right now with Greninjas everywhere. So, and other Hydreigons everywhere as well. So, excuse me. While I think this is a very standard list, I think the inclusion of Indeedee, Giant Capes to keep Hydreigon alive to effectively be able to attack with the same Hydreigon more than once, that's the most important thing here. And then Giovanni to potentially 1-hit KO a Suicune without a Giant Cape, right? And most Suicune decks aren't playing multiple Giant Capes, which you got to realize. So it's pretty likely that the Giovanni here is going to counterplay a Suicune and maybe take an early KO, right? So I do like Hydreigon right now. It is sort of the default high roll option. And I think that it doesn't really care what's going on in the metagame because you can change the deck around a little bit. We saw Hydreigon struggle a tad bit going into last week, but now I think this updated list in the face of course, all of the Suicune and Greninjas everywhere definitely makes this deck a little bit more well-positioned. So the Mega Absol here, I would be surprised if this card just got removed from the deck list at some point, but it can win you games, but it also loses you games sometimes if you bench it too early. So it's Hydreigon. It's Hydreigon high roll. It's turn 2 Hyper A 130. It's absolutely a broken card. Hydreigon is definitely sort of the premier single prize archetype in Pokemon Pocket right now, and I think that Giant Cape and Indeedees definitely make this much more of a threat, especially in the face of Suicune, which most of the time can only hit you for like 80 or 100 damage, right? So being able to attack, live, and then attack again is a really, really big deal, right? So that's why we're playing the Giant Capes, the Indeedees. So nothing else really different here. Again, Leap over Absol can be relevant, but for the most part, we don't see a lot of Altaria or 30 HP Pokemon. Like some decks are playing Chingling, but I kind of think Chingling is still really good right now because most decks are going to be seeing Arc Greninja or Hydreigon. So that's just my opinion, but I believe this is Saigon's deck, which he popped off with, I think, and he, of course, is always like number 1 on ranked. Typically, I don't pay too much mind to which deck Saigon's playing at the top of ranked battles, just because the metagame and the stuff that he's dealing with a lot of times as the number 1 ranked player is oftentimes not that relevant to the majority of people who are in like top 10,000, top 5,000. But I think that this Hydreigon deck makes a ton of sense because you're probably seeing a ton of Suicunes no matter where you are in ranked. So I think that playing a deck list like this, building a deck like this, which is good into Suicune, is very, very smart. So I really do like this list, and I would heavily recommend it. This has to be, out of all of the decks in today's video, probably the one that I would recommend the most, just because regardless of sort of how the meta fluctuates, this is going to be a strong option no matter what. Next up is Oricorio Magnezone. So again, a bit more of a specific counterplay deck to Suicune and Greninja. The downside to playing Oricorio Magnezone right now is that as people start to play more and more Hydreigon, this deck becomes more and more irrelevant, right? So I think for a period of time, this was a really, really strong choice, specifically because its matchups into Suicune and Greninja are amongst the highest out of any deck in the entire game, but it's absolutely horrible matchup into Hydreigon. So, I put it on the list here because it is still a really strong counter meta option this weekend, but it's really not something that I would choose to play myself. But again, if you're playing ranked and you don't see a lot of Hydreigon, then just play this deck because it's going to do really, really well into most decks that aren't Hydreigon. And I think that, if Hydreigon didn't exist, this would be just like the number 1 most successful deck in the meta right now. And it would like be the sole reason why Suicune and Greninja is getting like shut down. So I do like this deck. It's consistent. It's been buffed heavily. It's one of the more successful decks of this entire season, which is crazy. But again, the only bad matchup for this deck, truthfully, is going to be the Hydreigon matchup. And I think Hydreigon has the potential to be the most played deck going into this last week of the ranked season. So play your decks accordingly. And later in this video, I'll give you a hint of what I think the number 1 deck you should be playing right now is. I wanted to include something on the list here. Again, the meta is very condensed. I really wouldn't recommend Magnezone as much as any of the other decks in this video, but it is here for the people that want to play it. That's my opinions about Magnezone. Again, things are very condensed, right? I didn't want to make a video for only like 4 decks, so a couple of inclusions in here. This deck, including the weekly Wildcard, are decks that I wouldn't necessarily choose to play myself, but are decent options right now. Next up is going to be Blaziken, and I think that right now is a great time to be playing Blaziken, quite frankly. I think this is a deck that does well into Suicune, it does well into Hydreigon, and there's not much Oricorio seeing play. Like, I really do think Blaziken is well positioned right now. Out of any of the decks that you have available or saw play relevancy this season, I think that right now Blaziken has the opportunity to be pretty relevant. The only downside here to Blaziken is that I just don't see that many people choosing to play it because Hydreigon exists, and I think a lot of people would just rather play Hydreigon than than Mega Blaziken. But that being said, I think Mega Blaziken's still very, very, very good. And I think there's opportunity to edit this deck list too. Like, I think you could just straight up play this with Chingling and it would probably be broken. I don't know. I think there's definitely some room for some Blaziken progression, but I think that most people are just invested in Hydreigon right now as that sort of premier rare candy high roll option. And again, you're not going to love going against Chingling for sure. And most decks aren't playing middle evolutions anyway. But double Rocky Helmet, Heatmor with Sabrina and Cyrus. I really do like this deck. And when I play this deck and when I test it into basically all of the other decks in the metagame right now, I feel very strongly about it. What's funny though, is that when you play Suicune Greninja and you play ranked battles, you're going to go up against Decidueyes all the time. And then when you swap to Blaziken, you're never going to hit Decidueye. So that's just the funny part of ranked. But yeah, no, I really do like Blaziken. Again, it's not something that a lot of people are going to play right now, but also not many people playing Altaria. That's something I'll tell you right now. Altaria is massively struggling. I think the entire meta right now is built around just sort of beating Altaria, or it was previously, and now I think that there's really no reason to play Altaria because so many decks in play are just going to be strong into you. It's not something I would really recommend. There's other better decks that utilize Chingling, which we'll get to here in just a little bit. But I do like Blaziken. I really do like it. When I go up against this in ranked, like I know, okay, I might lose, I might win. My play here doesn't really determine my ability to win the game. It just depends on whether or not they draw the cards they need. If they get turn 2 Blaziken out, like it's really, really dangerous. So another high roll deck, but again, I said it multiple times here, but Hydreigon is the preferred high roll deck right now in the metagame. Even though this is more of a simplified version, it's probably not as good as Hydreigon. It's hard to say. It really is. Looking at Hydreigon's matchups, like, again, it's weird because it also gets kind of counterplayed by Chingling, which is going to lead me to our next deck list, which, to be honest with you, this is my #1 deck right now to play. And it's funny because we've seen this deck before as sort of, it popped up for like 1 week and was pretty relevant. But again, right now, just sort of the landscape of the current competitive metagame, I think that this deck list is really well positioned. And that's going to be Greninja and Chingling with Darkrai EX and Absol. The cool thing about this deck list is that you can utilize Chingling item lock and then go into your own Greninjas. And this is effectively broken. Chingling Rocky Helmet with Darkrai Nightmare Aura pings and the Greninja pings allows you to deal with other basic Pokemon really, really easily. Like if you trap like a Froakie in the active spot or a Dino in the active spot, you can actually chip down that Pokemon really quickly between Rocky Helmets, Darkrai, and then even Water Shuriken if you can get the Greninja out early enough, right? So if you think about this deck in the multitude of different matchups in the metagame, as long as we're not leading Darkrai or Absol, and again, you could even cut Mega Absol from this deck list, but it is what it is. Chingling lead here in this deck list is phenomenal right now, especially with the early Greninja. It's just, it adds up to be exactly what you need it to be. Double Greninja, double Cyrus, double Copycat. It's a very, very consistent rare candy deck. And unless we're going up against other Chinglings, which to be fair, in any other, head-to-head Chingling matchup, we should have a massive advantage playing a Nightmare or a Darkrai pings with Rocky Helmet. Like, even if we can't go into our Greninja, we should be able to KO our opposing Chingling very, very easily between Rocky Helmets and Darkrai EX. So in the head-to-head Chingling matchups, depending on which matchup that is, you should be at an advantage. And then in the late game, basically, like Rocky Helmet, chip damage with Nightmare Aura, and Greninja pings and Cyruses allows you to kind of pick and choose which Pokemon you want to KO in the late game. And the cool thing about this deck list specifically, and why I absolutely love Darkrai right now, is effectively every deck in the game is playing Indeedee. I don't know if you've noticed that, but every top like relevant meta deck right now is playing Indeedee, and that is a massive liability for for like when you're playing up against this deck list specifically, because think about it. Darkrai with Nightmare Aura ping plus Water Shuriken, Greninja, and Cyrus 1-hit KOs and Indeedee, right? So all we have to do to win the game is get this Darkrai on our board with like 2 or 3 energies, and then, we just Water Shuriken, ping it for 20, goes to 110 damage, HP. We Cyrus it up, and then we attach it to Darkrai, right? And then it goes to 90 HP, and then we hit for weakness, right? Because it's weak to Dark. So that combo, 1-hit KOs and Indeedee, and in the late game, it's almost always a free 2 prize cards, which inevitably is probably going to win you the game anyway, because we're probably KOing that basic in the active spot early with the Chingling lock. So that's the whole strategy here with this deck list. And I think it's very, very, very good. Again, you could even just play like you could cut the Absol from the deck, but I think also in the same vein, Absol is probably somewhat relevant. There's just The interesting thing about Absol is there's enough scenarios where it's worth playing Absol for you to just play it, even though it's going to lose you probably as many games as it's going to win you games, right? It's just weird like that. And not too much space in this deck. I think you got to play like double Research, double Pokeball, double Candy, double Cyrus, and probably double Rocky Helmet. Those are all really important cards to the deck. And then from there, you kind of just want to play consistency cards. And I think Copycat really does that for you. If we go first and we lead Froakie, it can feel bad. Of course, any Darkrai lead's not going to feel great either. But this is a deck list that is very dependent on that early game setup. So again, a Chingling lead, early Greninja, Water Shuriken, Darkrai on the bench, like you're probably just going to end up winning games. So this is a deck that's been doing really well into Suicune Greninja, and it also does well into Hydreigon because, again, of that Chingling lock. So one of the few decks right now in the game that is just uniquely positioned to do well into Suicune and Hydreigon because it is sort of a control deck. You're playing Greninja and Chingling, and this is the only deck right now that's playing Water Shuriken, Greninja, and Chingling, and I think that that's a deadly combination right now. Maybe there's other ways that we can play that combo, like instead of pairing it with Darkrai or Absol, but the Darkrai Nightmare Aura pings really do come in handy, and it pairs so extremely well with Chingling and Rocky Helmet. It's a ton of pressure on the active Pokemon. I really love this deck. In my testing with it over the last couple of days, I kind of would say this is the #1 deck that I would play in ranked battles right now. Again, you're going to see a ton of Suicune, you're going to see a ton of Hydreigon. That might not be what you expected to hear in today's video, but this to me is the #1 deck that I would choose to play. We'll see how it performs in the tournament this weekend, but again, I expect the two most played decks that we're going to see this weekend are Suicune and Hydreigon, right? So theoretically, this is a deck that should do well here. Probably also good into Altaria, even though the Chingling lock doesn't do too much. Water Shuriken plus Nightmare Aura and Jingly Noise and Rocky Helmets, like that's going to put enough pressure to potentially just KO like a Swablu on turn 2, right? Or their Chingling, or their Jirachi, right? Whatever it is. I really like this deck. Be careful when you bench Absol. Just be careful. You don't want either of these Pokemon really in the active spot in the early game. That's probably going to be a recipe for disaster. But if you lead a Froakie, it's not a big deal. We can just attach retreat into Chingling, or if we lead Chingling, of course, that is ideal, right? But yeah, maybe we kind of pair this with maybe we add some more baby Pokemon to the deck. I don't really know. One thing is for sure though, that this is a deck that struggles sometimes with consistency, but when it does what it wants to do, it will beat Hydreigon, it will beat Suicune, and I think that that's why it's the #1 option right now for me in this current week 2, going into week 2 of this ranked season. Things might change a ton depending on the results of this weekend's tournament. We're just gonna have to see. But anyway, here is my #1 choice. Lastly is going to be our wild card, which is what we talked about in yesterday's video. This is a deck list that I don't think should be disrespected. Again, the last 2 decks here are specifically decks that are built to be good into Suicune as well as into Hydreigon. I think that this deck does it a little bit better than this deck does, but this is still an impressive deck. And again, I didn't have anything else to really include for the weekly wildcard, and I know we just covered this in yesterday's video because we've, of course, haven't had much to talk about really on the channel towards the end of the season, but I do think that this is a decent option. And again, I think that Jolteon's kind of broken. I still don't feel super confidently in this deck against Suicune, but the data does show that it has a decent enough matchup into Suicune and Hydreigon that it might be just sort of worth something to consider, right? So again, not something I would recommend above really anything else that we talked about in today's video, but this is still sort of a contending deck right now. It's seeing kind of fringe play in online tournaments, and I wouldn't be shocked if we see a couple of these in day 2 tomorrow, or on Sunday in our tournament this weekend. But again, the metagame very condensed, right? I mean, that's just how it goes. Inevitably, towards the end of the seasons, what we're gonna get is just sort of the same 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 decks that are all gonna be vying for the top spot, and they're gonna kind of shift and swap levels of viability depending on which decks are seeing more play, right? That's just how it goes when you're 5, 6 weeks into a ranked season. Until the next mini set comes out in about less than 2 weeks now. And then, in about 2 weeks. And then we should be getting a pretty decent idea of, less than 2 weeks is when the mini set comes out, which is exciting, but that's going to be a whole meta shakeup. Like, trust me, it'll probably be a single pack mini set. My assumption is, but the ranked season and the season that we're going to get with the next mini set is probably only going to be like 3 weeks long. So, that's something to keep in mind. Keep your eye moving forward here, because I really do think that the meta is going to change a ton once this new mini set comes out. And I think even in the week leading up to the end of this ranked season, things are probably going to shift as well. So we'll keep you updated here on the channel. But this was a quick one today, a quick best decks for ranked video. Again, these are all decks that we've talked about before. I just wanted to give you like a meta update in terms of what you think, or what I think you're probably going to see in ranked battles and which decks I would recommend. So keep in mind, when ranked first came out, it was all Altaria, and then everybody played Suicune, and we kind of farmed the Altaria decks. and then it was sort of counter Suicune. Hydreigon was changed in order to be a little bit better into the Suicune matchup, and now certain decks are rising up to, fit the niche of being pretty decent, right, into things like Suicune and Greninja and Hydreigon, both of them, right? So, and I think that that's really where this deck falls in line. Yeah, some wild cards for sure. I mean, I think this is definitely a wild card, but, Blaziken definitely can be pretty good. I think Orimag, although I'm not very confident in it, is probably fairly decent as well if you're just hitting a ton of Suicunes, right, on the ranked ladder. But anyway, there it is. That's a quick one today. We wanted to keep it short for you guys, but definitely don't forget to like and subscribe. Comment down below, how's ranked been going for you? What are your opinions about this ranked season right now? I know some people are just like, it's been a long time. We just want new cards. That's how it works, right? That's just the reality of how the release cycle works in Pokemon Pocket. So there's nothing we can really do about that, but definitely go register for our tournament tomorrow. $250 in the prize pool. It's going to be a ton of fun, and I'm really curious to see what happens. I would be shocked if Suicune won again, because Suicune did win last weekend. I would be shocked if it won because there's so much counterplay to it right now. I think the entire meta is sort of shifting around beating it. So that would be my recommendation, or these would be my recommendations right now. But anyway, we'll see. Tune into the live streams this weekend. Going to be a ton of fun. And yeah, that's all I got today. That's all we got. It's a short one today. It's a rare short video here on the channel, but there's just not much to talk about, quite frankly. And I think that we're going to have to see the results of the tournament to really develop our opinion, moving forward into this last week. But you'll hear from me for sure. We'll cover it all here on the channel. But anyway, let's get out of here. Peace out. Have a good one. We'll see you guys later.